Benjamin missed his dear ones in America, but even when he heard that Sally would marry and that Debbie was ill, he stayed in his beloved London, trying to save the empire. In a desperate move, hoping to aim Americans' anger at a colonial governor rather than at their king, George III, Benjamin leaked the contents of Governor Hutchinson's private letters. They called for more troops to sternly control the colonists and even a denial of their rights as British citizens. You may shut up their ports one by one, you may reduce their cities to ashes, but the flame of liberty in North America shall not be extinguished. A great country of hardy peasants is not to be subdued. Benjamin Franklin's letter to Lord Buckinghamshire, April 2nd, 1774. January 29th, 1774. The plan backfired. Furious colonists, hearing of the governor's words, tossed taxed tea into Boston Harbor. Just as furious was the king when he heard of Franklin's part in this outrageous turn of events. Benjamin was ordered to appear before the king's ministers. Scandal-mad Londoners came, eager to see an international celebrity brought low, laughed at, and insulted. But if they thought Benjamin felt humiliated or disgraced, then they were fools. Behind his icy stare was silent outrage. His dream of a British empire of equals was at an end. Finally, in the spring of 1775, Benjamin Franklin, American rebel, was on his way home. Love your enemies, for they will tell you their faults. PRA, 1756. On April 19, 1775, in Lexington, Massachusetts, the troubles between colonists and British soldiers flared into fighting. The Revolutionary War had begun. 2 weeks later, after more than 10 years in Europe, Benjamin, along with his teenage grandson, Temple, was welcomed home by Sally, her husband, Mr. Bach, and their children. Benjamin's wife, Deborah, the long-ago laughing girl, had died. 5 days after he stepped off the boat, Benjamin went to the State House to take his place at the Continental Congress. He'd met tall George Washington, but most of the delegates were young strangers. Many of them still hoped for peace with Britain. Not Benjamin. His hurt equaled the love he'd had for the empire, and that went for his son, too. William was stubbornly loyal to Britain. Benjamin cut them both out of his heart. They that can give up essential liberty to obtain a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Benjamin Franklin, Historical Review of Pennsylvania, 1759. The delegates in Philadelphia chose Washington to lead the Continental Army and Benjamin to be postmaster. That was easy. Now the penniless Congress had to come up with forces to fight the world's most powerful empire. The Patriots captured Montreal but were horribly beaten at Quebec. In June 1775, the British won a bloody victory at Bunker or Breed's Hill, then occupied near Boston. Not until March 1776 were they driven out by George Washington's troops. Meanwhile, the delegates faced a decision. George Washington. Benjamin Franklin. God helps them that helps themselves. PRA, 1736. If the delegates from the American colonies voted to break away from Britain, they would have to explain to the people of the world, who generally believed that monarchs were set on their thrones by the will of God, why they were rebelling against their lawful king. Tall, lanky Thomas Jefferson of Virginia drafted the manifesto, then took what he had written to Benjamin, the old editor. He sharpened up some of the phrases, then the entire Congress argued over every word. What they were doing was dead serious, historic, radical. Words were everything. At last, on July 4th, the men voted, and Jefferson took the final version to leather-aproned printers. You and I were long friends. You are now my enemy, and I am yours. B. Franklin. Benjamin Franklin's unsent letter to a British friend, July 5th, 1775. At noon on July 8th, 1776, people crowded onto the State House yard to listen to a reading of the Declaration of Independence. With these last words, we mutually pledged to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. There were no doubt grim thoughts and tears as well as cheers, 13 cannon blasts, and deep chimes from the bell that would be called Liberty. It's one thing to write such a document. Imagine signing it and branding yourself a traitorous revolutionary. As the delegates wrote their names, John Hancock of Boston is said to have remarked that the signers must all now hang together. Some said that old Benjamin wisecracked back, "Yes, we must indeed all hang together, or else, most assuredly, we shall all hang separately." Without freedom of thought, there can be no such thing as wisdom, and no such thing as liberty without freedom of speech. Mrs. Silence Dogood, July 9th, 1722. In New York, General Washington's soldiers faced a huge fleet of warships full of British troops. Thousands of bayonets glittered like the sharp claws of an angry lion, ready to pounce on a baby eagle. At this critical moment, Benjamin and two of his fellow rebels, John Adams of Massachusetts and Edward Rutledge of South Carolina, journeyed to meet Lord Howe, the king's admiral. In a crowded inn along the way, Benjamin and the stocky Mr. Adams had a legendary argument over the window in their room. Benjamin won. It stayed open. On September 11, 1776, they walked past a living stockade of tall, stern soldiers to meet with the aristocratic officer. He politely offered lunch to his guests and a chance to give up this unfortunate revolution as British subjects or fight it as enemies. The Americans would fight. 4 days later, British forces captured the city of New York. General Washington and his poorly armed soldiers fought and retreated again and again up Manhattan Island. As the year 1776 came to an end, the barely begun revolution was in terrible trouble. The men of the Continental Congress knew that their only hope was across the ocean. Someone had to go to Paris and beg help from their old enemy, France. Without it, America's patriot cause was doomed. Benjamin Franklin began packing. Early to bed and early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. PRA 1735. No gains without pains. PRA 1745. Britain was the most powerful empire in the 1700s, but, from Ireland to Russia, high-class people envied and admired the culture of France. And whom did the French most admire? The great scientist who'd stolen sacred fire from the heavens, then stood up to hated England. The witty Bonham, Richard of the Almanac. To himself, he was a tired-out old man on a mission. He and his two grandsons, Benny Botch and Temple, had just survived a cold voyage across stormy seas, afloat with men eager to put a famous traitor in chains. On December 21st, 1776, as General Washington's ragged army shivered 3,000 miles away, cheering Parisians surrounded the carriage of fur-hatted Dr. Franklin superstar. What you would seem to be really. PRA 1744. Privately, stealthily, America got money and weapons but no official help from France. King Louis XVI had no love for revolutions except for one that would sting his enemy, Britain. But did he wish to anger it by helping rebellious losers? None. A desperately needed military pact with France could be earned only by a big American victory. It happened at last, in October 1777, when about 5,000 redcoats were captured at Saratoga, New York. On February 6, 1778, the vital treaty was signed. Benjamin, wearing the coat he'd worn in London in 1774 on the Day of Insults, watched with grim satisfaction. Now, shy, tubby Louis XVI and his fancy queen, Marie Antoinette, could officially meet the representatives of revolutionary America. Now Benjamin knew the defeat of Britain was possible. American independence was possible. There is no little enemy. PRA 1733. The lady is playing an harmonica, Benjamin's invention. Her moistened fingers on the revolving glasses make soft, delicate music. When he was young, Benjamin made sure that his Philadelphia neighbors saw how hardworking and thrifty he truly was because they valued those qualities and he needed their business. Now, when his country badly needed the approval of pleasure-loving French aristocrats, he pleased them with an easygoing version of himself. Their artificial society was old and rule-bound. To them, he was the wigless, bespectacled philosopher from a young, idealistic country, a simple man. Ha! Benjamin was anything but. Eat to please thyself, but dress to please others. PRA 1738. With little French-speaking ability, he fought for America's independence. His weapons, charm and wily intelligence. His battlefields, his messy desk, a small printing press, and candlelit parlors. He laid the groundwork for much-needed loans and trade. To get and make gunpowder, he worked with the great chemist, Antoine Laurent Lavoisier. He helped would-be warriors such as Baron von Steuben and the teenage Marquis de Lafayette to join the fight in America. Artists, scientists, Americans needing help, flirtatious ladies all came to visit Benjamin. Human felicity is produced not so much by great pieces of good fortune that seldom happen as by little advantages that occur every day. Benjamin Franklin's autobiography. September 3, 1783. At last, in 1781, the bloody, cruel war ground to an end, and the Americans, with the help of the French Navy at Yorktown, won their independence from Great Britain. In Paris, Benjamin, John Adams, and John Jay labored over the complicated peace and trade agreements until, at last, on September 3, 1783, the final, formal treaty was signed and the United States was born. When in the summer of 1785 it came time for Benjamin to leave, a carriage was too bumpy and painful for a sore-jointed old man. Queen Marie Antoinette loaned him her litter and 2 gentle mules for his farewell journey to France's coast. In England, he saw old friends and William, his loyalist and exile son, one last time. Then he and his tall-grown grandsons sailed west to the nation that Benjamin had helped to invent. There never was a good war or a bad peace. Benjamin Franklin's letter to Josiah Quincy, September 11, 1783. What a chiming, ding-donging, gun-booming, cheering welcome awaited 79-year-old Benjamin when he got home. September 14, 1785. And not long after, a new job, president of the state of Pennsylvania, much like being a modern-day governor. But as always, he made time for what stirred his busy brain and his heart. New grandchildren, building projects such as a print shop for his grandson, Benny Botch, making English easier to spell, inventions such as an arm extender for reaching books from the tall shelves in the library he had built onto his house, a rolling press for copying the many letters he wrote as he soaked his naked old self in cool morning air or in his copper tub. He met with other curious men at the American Philosophical Society. He was president of it, too, and of the nation's first anti-slavery society. Again, Benjamin was far, far ahead of his time. We landed at Market Street Wharf, where we were received by a crowd of people with huzzas, and accompanied with acclamations quite to my door, found my family well, God be praised and thanked for all his mercies. Benjamin Franklin's letter to David Hartley, September 14, 1785. It's one thing to win a war. It's another for a new nation to run itself and pay its bills. Could the United States do it? So far, not very well. Everyone agreed that something must be done. In the spring of 1787, a call went out to the states for men to come back to Philadelphia. Pennsylvania State House. In this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes. Benjamin Franklin's letter to John Baptiste Leroy, November 13, 1789. 4 sturdy men carried Benjamin in his sedan chair back to the State House, where he joined the men sitting around the familiar tables. George Washington, chosen to preside, walked to the front of the room and sat down on a tall, curvy chair into which a sun was carved, peeking over a polished horizon. Sentries guarded the door, and James Madison of Virginia began recording the secret sessions of the Constitutional Convention. Hard enough it would be to thrash out all of the delegates' ideas about what kind of nation theirs should be without outsiders chiming in. It would take a miracle, everyone agreed, to come up with a government that would work for their time and for the unimaginable years to come. We were sent here to consult, not to contend with each other. Benjamin Franklin in the record of the Constitutional Convention. There would be a judicial branch, topped by a Supreme Court, and an executive branch, topped by a man elected for a short time so he wouldn't be too kingly. As the weather warmed, hot arguments over the legislative branch about killed the convention. Big and small states had to be equally represented, but how? The delegates compromised. A House of Representatives, elected according to population, and a Senate with 2 people from each state. All of this and plenty more obsessed the men that summer. Difficult subjects, such as slavery, were put off. Many people were frightened that a too powerful government would squash the liberties of individual citizens and states. Had they gotten out from under a king only to be bossed by homegrown politicians? A Bill of Rights, added later, would fix the problem. I wish the bald eagle had not been chosen as the representative of our country. He is a bird of bad moral character. The turkey is a much more respectable bird, and withal a true original native of America. Benjamin Franklin's letter to Sally Botch, January 26, 1784. September 17, 1787. The new government would work, Benjamin figured, as long as the people in it ran it well. As long as the citizens were good and strong, their government would be too. The delegates took Benjamin's advice and agreed to accept the new laws unanimously. As they signed the Constitution, he gazed at the carved sun on the tall, curvy chair. At last, he said, the happiness to know that it is a rising and not a setting sun. In Philadelphia today, in Independence Hall, that wooden sun on Washington's chair still has not risen or set. Citizens still argue. The miraculous United States Constitution is an ongoing experiment, a work in progress. I agreed to this Constitution with all its faults. Benjamin Franklin in the record of the Constitutional Convention, September 17, 1787. Benjamin spent his remaining time on Earth pondering things that still made him curious. Had the Earth always been magnetic? How did fossils of warm weather animals come to be found in cold places? Had the poles shifted? Would the world keep getting better? News of revolution in his much-loved France troubled him. So did the Americans' treatment of the Indians and the Congress's refusal to end slavery. Mankind, Benjamin believed, was equally designed for the enjoyment of happiness. Slavery is such an atrocious debasement of human nature. Benjamin Franklin's address to the public from the Pennsylvania Society for Promoting the Abolition of Slavery, November 9, 1789. He was happy in spite of his painful 84-year-old body. He was content with his family, pleased to have lived to see the grand machine of America's government begin to work, and delighted that his friend George Washington was its first president. Benjamin's daughter and grandchildren were nearby when he slipped out of his 18th century world. April 17, 1790. Benjamin Franklin was indeed very special, just as his father Josiah had known from the very beginning. The body of B. Franklin printer, like the cover of an old book, its contents torn out and stripped of its lettering and gilding, lies here, food for worms. But the work shall not be lost, for it will, as he believed, appear once more in a new and more elegant edition, revised and corrected by the author. Benjamin Franklin, Epitaph, 1728. The 18th Century World of Benjamin Franklin. 1706. January 17th. Benjamin Franklin is born in Boston, Massachusetts Bay Colony, 15th of his parents' 17 children. 1707. The kingdoms of England, Wales, and Scotland unite to form Great Britain. 1716. Benjamin leaves school to work in his father's shop. 1718. Benjamin starts learning the printer's trade. November 21st. Edward Teach, a.k.a. the ferocious pirate Blackbeard, is captured. 1719. Daniel Defoe writes Robinson Crusoe based on a true story. 1721. Johann Sebastian Bach writes the Brandenburg Concertos. 1723. Benjamin runs away from home. He ends up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. 1724 to 1726. Benjamin lives and works in London. 1726. Jonathan Swift publishes his book Gulliver's Travels. 1727. Back in Philadelphia, Benjamin invents a community action network, the Junto. 1729. He begins publishing and editing the Pennsylvania Gazette. 1730. September 1st, Benjamin Franklin marries Deborah Reed Rogers. About this same time, Benjamin's son William is born. 1731. Benjamin's Junto establishes America's first circulating library. Benjamin Banneker, Black American mathematician/astronomer, is born in Maryland. 1732. February 22nd, George Washington, first U.S. president, is born in Virginia. March 31st, Joseph Haydn, Austrian composer, is born. October 20th, Benjamin's son Francis Folger Franklin is born. December, first edition of Poor Richard's Almanac is published. 1734, November 2nd, Daniel Boone, trailblazer, is born in Pennsylvania. 1735, January 1st, Paul Revere, American patriot, is born in Massachusetts. October 30th, John Adams, second U.S. president, is born there too. 1736, Benjamin starts the Union Fire Company in Philadelphia. November 21st, his 4-year-old son Francis dies. 1737, Benjamin becomes Philadelphia's postmaster. Adams, Washington. 1738, June 4th, the future King George III is born in London, England. 1740, Maria Theresa of Austria is crowned Holy Roman Empress. 1741, George Friedrich Handel composes Messiah. Benjamin is developing his Pennsylvania fireplace, aka the Franklin stove. Jefferson. 1742, Anders Celsius of Switzerland invents the centigrade thermometer. 1743, April 13th, Thomas Jefferson, third U.S. president, is born in Virginia. September 11th, Sarah Sally Franklin is born. Benjamin begins the American Philosophical Society, a club for scientists to promote useful knowledge. Sally Franklin. 1748, September. Benjamin retires from the printing business so he can spend more time on scientific experiments in his community. Discovered in Italy, ruins of Pompeii destroyed by volcano in AD 79. 1749. Benjamin proposes a school, the Academy of Pennsylvania. In time, it will become the University of Pennsylvania. 1751, March 16. James Madison, fourth U.S. president, is born in Virginia. Benjamin invents a kind of fundraising still in use today. Money collected by the people is matched by the government. In this way, he gets America's first city hospital built. 1752, January 1st, legendary flag maker Betsy Ross is born in Pennsylvania. June, Benjamin's electrical experiment with the kite and the key. For his scientific achievements, he is awarded the Copley Medal, the 18th century version of today's Nobel Prize. He will use his discovery to invent the lightning rod. September 14th, the British Empire adopts the more accurate Gregorian calendar. Benjamin's birthday, January 6th, on the old Julian calendar becomes January 17th. 1753. Carolus Linnaeus of Sweden establishes the scientific method of naming plants and animals. August 10th, Benjamin becomes Deputy Postmaster General for the Northern Colonies. 1754, French and Indian War begins near present-day Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Benjamin develops a plan that would unite the colonies. 1755, November 2nd, Marie Antoinette, future Queen of France, is born in Austria. 1756, January 2nd, composer Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart is born in Austria. 1757, the Pennsylvania Assembly sends Benjamin to England. 1758, April 28th, James Monroe, 5th U.S. President, is born in Virginia. Benjamin publishes The Way to Wealth. 1761, September 22nd, coronation of 23-year-old King George III. 1762, Catherine the Great becomes Empress of Russia. Benjamin returns to Philadelphia. He brings along his new invention, the glass harmonica. King George III. 1764, St. Louis, first permanent French settlement on the Mississippi, is founded. November, Benjamin sails again to London. 1765, British Parliament passes the Stamp Act as a means of taxing Americans. 1767, March 15th, Andrew Jackson, 7th U.S. President, is born in one of the Carolinas. No one knows which one. July 11th, John Quincy Adams, 6th U.S. President, is born in Massachusetts. 1769, first lightning rods are placed on rooftops. July 16th, Father Junipero Serra founds the first California mission at San Diego. August 15th, Napoleon Bonaparte, future Emperor of France, is born in Corsica. Pontiac, warrior and unifying tribal leader, dies in Cahokia, Illinois. 1770, March 5th, violence breaks out between British troops and Americans in Boston. August 1st, William Clark, explorer, is born in Virginia. December 16th, composer Ludwig van Beethoven is born in Germany. Explorer James Bruce discovers the source of the Blue Nile River in Africa. 1771, Benjamin begins writing his autobiography. 1773, February 9th, William Henry Harrison, 9th U.S. President, is born in Virginia. December 16th, tax protest known as the Boston Tea Party takes place. 1774, Mother Ann Lee and a band of followers to be known as the Shakers land in America. August 18th, Meriwether Lewis, explorer, is born in Virginia. September 5th, the First Continental Congress convenes in Philadelphia. December 19th, Deborah Reed Franklin, age 66, dies. Deborah Franklin. 1775, April 19th, first shots of the Revolutionary War are fired at Lexington and Concord, Massachusetts. May 5th, Benjamin returns home from London. May 10th, the Second Continental Congress begins at Philadelphia. June 17th, Battle of Bunker Hill or Breed's Hill near Boston, Massachusetts, is fought. July 3rd, General George Washington takes command from the Continental Army. December 16th, Jane Austen, great English novelist, is born. Daniel Boone makes the Wilderness Road to Kentucky. Throughout the 1700s, inventions such as the spinning jenny and James Watt's improved engine are making possible a turning point in history. The Industrial Revolution. 1776, January 9th, Thomas Paine publishes his patriotic bestseller Common Sense. July 4th, the Declaration of Independence is adopted. October 27th, Benjamin Franklin sails to Paris. December 25th to 26th, General Washington and his men cross the Delaware River into New Jersey. Their victory there saves the failing American Revolution. 1777, October 17th, turning point in the war, American victory at Saratoga, New York. 1778, February 6th, the United States and France become partners against the British. James Cook discovers the Hawaiian Islands. 1781, October 19th, British forces surrender to General Washington at Yorktown, Virginia. British astronomer William Herschel discovers the planet Uranus. 1783, September 3rd, Treaty of Paris formally ends the Revolutionary War for American independence. December 1st, in Paris, Benjamin witnesses the Montgolfier brothers' first manned flights in lighter-than-air balloons. 1784, Benjamin invents bifocals so he can see near and far through the same glasses. December 5th, Phyllis Wheatley, Black American poet, dies in Boston. Great Britain takes political control of India. 1785, January 7th, Jean-Pierre Blancard and Dr. John Jeffries cross the English Channel in a hot air balloon. In 1793, Dr. Jeffries will make the first balloon voyage in the United States. September 14th, Benjamin returns home to Philadelphia. 1787, January 27th to February 4th, Shays' Rebellion, a tax revolt in Massachusetts, tests the strength of the new American government. May 25th to September 17th, Benjamin is a delegate to the United States Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. February 23rd, Emma Hart Willard, champion of higher education for girls, is born in Connecticut. August 22nd, inventor John Fitch launches his steamboat on the Delaware River. 1788, June 21st, the U.S. Constitution goes into effect. Benjamin Franklin. 1789, Antoine Laurent Lavoisier publishes the first modern chemistry textbook. April 28th, mutiny at sea on the HMS Bounty. April 30th, George Washington's inauguration day in New York City. July 14th, Parisians storm the Bastille prison. The French Revolution begins. 1790, March 29th, John Tyler, 10th U.S. President, is born in Virginia. April 17th, Benjamin Franklin dies in Philadelphia. July 16th, George Washington signs legislation establishing the first permanent federal city in what is now known as Washington, D.C. August 10th, the Columbia is the first American vessel to sail around the world.